Hi, it's Anika from Living for Later, and all that is going on right now, I feel, is just really hitting at just this idea of people being fearful of dying prematurely. And I think that we are really realizing that we don't have as much control as we thought we did, and that control really is an illusion. And it's easy to get swept away with all of this fear. Well, I was reading this morning something that really encouraged my heart that I want to share with you as well. So in Matthew 7 verse 30, we have Jesus, and you see where the religious leaders are just extremely annoyed with him. He is just ruffling their feathers, and something interesting is said though in verse 30 that I want to share with you. So this is Jesus, and it's speaking of just the religious leaders and them just wanting to take him out. They wanted to kill him. They were just so through with him. But listen to what verse 30 says. At this time, they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him, speaking of Jesus, because his hour had not yet come. So here's the thing. Jesus, and the fact that he came to do the will of the Father, and he was not preoccupied with a selfish agenda, the fact that he was walking in full obedience to God the Father insulated him, if you will, against dying a premature death. And here is the thing that we really need to grab a hold of. If it is not your time to go, and you know that you are pursuing the will of God, you don't have to live in a state of being preoccupied with just this fear of dying prematurely. However, here's the other part of it, that I think sometimes we think that if I'm doing the will of God, that means that I should live until, I'm 100 years old. But that's not the case. If we look, right, we see Jesus, he dies in his early 30s. However, you have in the book of Luke, the prophetess Hannah, and the scripture says that she was 84 years old and she was still living. She was a faithful servant of the Lord. So here it is, we have Jesus where his life was, he died crucified. He was crucified in his early 30s, but then you have another faithful servant of the Lord, Anna, who God allowed to live until she was well up in age. So I think because we want so badly to cling to life or life here on earth, that we miss the fact that God's economy is a little bit different from this world's economy. We don't like the idea of loss. So any death, most death, right, in our mindset is premature. But here's the thing. If I have lived for 20 years, and for those years I have put towards walking in obedience to God, and I have sought to do his will, and I followed the template of Jesus, saying, I'm not pursuing my own agenda. I'm pursuing the will of the one that sent me. And if I do that, right, and I end up dying at 20 years old, I did not die a premature death, because the reality is I died when it was my time. So I think we just have to really go back to the word to really be grounded in truth and not fight, right? Oh my goodness, I don't want to die prematurely. If it's not your time to go and you're walking in full obedience, you don't have to worry that you're going to die. But at the same time, if it is your time to go and you end up dying, we don't have to, just be in this state of like hopelessness and, let me just hold on. God knows, right, when it is our time. So the question is not about when I die, but more, or how many years God gives me here on earth, but more about what am I doing with the years that have been given to me? Am I committed to doing the will of God and living on purpose for him, or am I trying to play it safe, to make sure I don't die prematurely. All right, so let me get back to Jesus as the example. Listen to this because I think this is so beautiful and it really drives the point home, right? So after he was on earth doing his earthly ministry, his time had come and he knew that it was the hour for him to die, right? But in John 18, we have where, they come and they're coming to arrest him. And Peter pulls out his sword and cuts off the ear of one of the guards that came to get Jesus. And Jesus is like, hold on, Peter, hold on. Listen to what he says in John 18, verse 11. He said, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? So Jesus recognized, like, listen, this is not happening prematurely, Peter. Peter was resisting the idea of Jesus dying, and Jesus is like, no, it's my time. All this time that they were trying to seize me in the temple and trying to take me out prematurely, it wasn't my time. But now it is my time, right? And then you flip over right here, and I love Jesus. Jesus, like, checks people all the time, like, and he reminds them, you don't have no control. So listen to this in John chapter 19, where he's before Pilate. And in verse 10, Pilate says to him, Jesus, do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? Listen to what Jesus says to him. In verse 11, Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. So Jesus is like, don't get it twisted. This is not a premature thing, and you're not in control of anything, Pilate. This is now my hour. Before you all thought it was my hour, but now this is my hour. So you don't have any control over any of this. So I just want to encourage us, like, to not be fearful and be gripped by, oh my goodness, I'm gonna die a premature death. Slow it down. When it's your time, it's your time. But if you are walking in obedience to God and it's not your time, you don't have to be crippled by fear. So the question again is not about when am I going to die, but am I prepared to die? And am I pouring my life out in obedience to God and doing what he has called me to do? That's my business at this point in the game, right? Because after it's all said and done and I stand before him, whether or not I lived until I was 20 or whether or not I lived until I was 84 or 100, the response that I'm going to get from him is either, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord, or depart from me, I never knew you. So don't be preoccupied with fear of dying prematurely. Focus on living on purpose and know that God knows when it's your time, and just be ready. All right, you be blessed.